Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiology and nutrition professor of about 20 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I'm a strength coach, powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, and getting ready to head down to San Antonio, Texas right after this to coach Big Brian through a meet down there.
Nice.
And my name's Dave Whitley. Call me Iron Tamer, and I'm a performing strongman, motivational speaker, and strength coach. Been involved in strength stuff most of my life.
Awesome. Yeah, we've had David on 9 years ago. We were just figuring this out, everybody, before we hit the record button. So we're going to catch up with what he's done since that time. If you want his origin story, of course, you can go back to 2010. And what episode was that, Phil? Do you remember?
79.
79. And you can get his origins from the very beginning. We're going to start with a little bit of news, though, before catching up with Dave about his recent 9 years.
Strength and muscle sport news.
These are a little funny. Sometimes, of course, listeners, you guys know that we'll do like a recent breaking study and that sort of thing. These are both food industry news bits, and they're sort of dueling and sparring with each other, which I think is funny. So I'm going to start with one that probably isn't surprising, which is a huge part of the food industry is moving toward fake meat. You know, Phil was bitching about this the other week about, I don't want a steak that's actually made from broccoli. I want a steak, and stuff like that. But the food industry is really moving toward plant-based stuff. Now, I'm old enough, and I bet you guys are too, that you guys remember back in the day, like in high school, they'd serve like soy burgers, and you're like, oh, come on, it's not a hamburger kind of thing. But in any case, they're getting better at it, and they're moving in that direction. So Tim Hortons is jumping on the bandwagon here. So this is very much in tune with the surge in plant-based protein powders, plant-based proteins in the grocery store, and even in fast food. So this says Tim Hortons, and if Fortress was on, he would be snickering about this because, of course, they're real big in Canada. Coffee shop, of course. There's a few down here in Ohio. I don't know if you get down to your level in latitudes, Phil, if they actually have Tim Hortons coffee.
No.
Kind of a northern thing, but it says Tim Hortons has quickly expanded its plant-based offerings. In June, the Canadian coffee chain launched Beyond Meat breakfast sandwiches. And they're also adding these sort of plant-based options to their lunch and dinner menus. It says, now it's the first major fast food chain to test plant-based eggs. So they're putting fake eggs, essentially, plant-based eggs in breakfast sandwiches. It says, quote, "We're always listening to our guests and testing a wide variety of potential products in select restaurants across the country," said Sarah McConnell, media rep at Tim Hortons. So if you are in the north, I know we have a lot of Canadian listeners, and of course if you live close enough to the Canadian border like I do, then you do see some Tim Hortons. They're going to have breakfast sandwiches that are made of plant-based eggs, I guess.
I can add on to this. One of my clients, who's a Canadian lifter that moved down here to train with me, just went back and visited her family for a month. And her and her husband came back, and like they said, the only place now that sells real beef burgers is McDonald's. Everyone else has switched.
Wow.
To Beyond Meat, and they are directly north of us, so it's like the Kansas of Canada. So it's very like farmers and blue collar. She said everybody's pissed. Everybody's pissed.
Oh, wow.
But I guess the butchers are making a killing because everybody's going and buying meat now instead of going out. So, but
yeah, it's the only way you can get it, I guess, huh?
Yep.
Yeah, that's very reflective. I mean, I can tell listeners behind the scenes, I get all these industry magazines and, journals and whatnot, and all of them. I mean, this is clearly the directions that these places are going, and it does look like the average, well, I almost said American, but obviously, or Canadian or wherever, the average consumer is interested in these sorts of things. My concern is that plant-based proteins usually are incomplete compared to animal-based. You know, they're missing one or more of the indispensable amino acids. Now, it's not usually a problem if you eat a real wide variety of plant-based proteins throughout the day. But, you know, there's some disturbing work out of Stu Phillips' lab from years ago that, like, for example, soy doesn't stimulate muscle protein synthesis in the same way that, let's say, whey does after a workout, things like that. But I digress. The other one, and my only other one here before Phil can start asking some questions of Dave here, is the opposite. And I just think this is funny. So, Phil, you mentioned McDonald's being like this single exemplar of beef. This one is entitled, Arby's is exploring meat-based vegetables. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. So instead of vegetable-based meats, so it says here, this came out of Atlanta. And again, a lot of this stuff is, let's see, I think this is from Institute of Technologists. Food Business News.
If I can interrupt you for a second, I'm gonna pull a Leonardo DiCaprio line here and say that a moment ago you had my interest, now you have my attention.
There you go. So it says a growing number of restaurants are adding plant-based alternatives, including, and this is sort of to Phil's point, Burger King, Red Robin. Oh, not Red Robin. White Castle, Applebee's. There's just several of these brands on here. It says TGI Fridays, Carl's Jr., A&W, Del Taco, all offering items made with Beyond Meat. It says Arby's, on the other hand, is moving in a different direction. Quote, plant-based meats are the latest incarnation of making vegetables look like what Americans really want, which is great, tasty meat, says Jim Taylor, Chief Marketing Officer at Arby's. Universally, people know that we're supposed to eat vegetables every day, but 90% of Americans don't eat that recommended amount. So we said if others can make meat out of vegetables, why can't we make vegetables out of meat? And there's a picture on here that actually shows these. It's sausages basically shaped into carrots. So they're using sausage as the raw material, and they're making it look like carrots. Let's see. It says, Mr. Taylor tasked Neville Craw, VP of Culinary Innovation and Brand Executive Chef for Arby's, creating the first vegetable, so meat-based vegetable. And so this is a carrot, it looks like. They're calling it the merit. It's meat that looks like a carrot. So I just thought I would share that. It's like dueling, sparring marketing reps in the food industry. And Arby's is bucking the trend. A lot of people probably remember that Arby's is the one who, they talk about meat craft, and they're all about the meats. And it's almost a mocking move. But it'd be interesting to see if it takes off. So, okay. That's it for the...
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. And I'm going to file both of those things under the category of just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Both ways. Yep.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I didn't understand about the whole Canadian thing. Is like, I understand offering it. Having them both. I don't understand making the complete switch. It sounds like a bad business strategy to me. But because you're excluding a large percentage of the population that just maybe still wants meat. But yeah, whatever.
Yeah. If you remember last week, there's all the talk about confusing consumers and how if you don't call everything meat, it confuses consumers. Right? And we're like sort of bitching that it's the opposite. Like, I'm actually confused. If I go buy a carrot at Arby's and it's made out of sausage, I'm scratching my head, But if I go get an egg sandwich and it's made out of soy, that's kind of pissing me off too. So I'm confused. Like, to me, it's like everything goes now, and we don't even have common definitions for what's a plant and what's a meat anymore. So, anyway.
Yep. So, anyways, Dave, so how you been? Well, it's been 9 years since we had you on. What have you been up to?
Lots and lots of things. I've done a lot of traveling, a lot of teaching, had a son, and lots of fun stuff like that. That's my big thing right now that I'm telling everybody about. My son just turned 9 months old, and it's my first child, and super excited about it, and all of the cliches that new parents say. But what sets me apart from a lot of folks that are new dads is that I was 49 years old when we had him. So he'll turn 1, and then I'll turn 50, which is a little bit backwards from how we do things traditionally, I guess, but that's sort of on par for me. So that's fun. Let's see. In 2010, when I was on the show, I would have been part of the RKC with Dragon Door Publications and Pavel and all of that. If anyone's familiar with it, if you're not, that's just the way it was, and that's what I did. I was with them as a master instructor. I think that started in 2010. So somewhere right around the time that I was on the show last time, I was in the position newly of being a master instructor for the RKC, kettlebell certifications, and all that sort of stuff. The RKC split into 2 different factions when Pavel left Dragon Door, and I was a part of the new organization called Strong First from 2012 or 2013. I guess it's 2013 until 2016. Is that right? Yeah, 3 years ago. So right about 3 years ago, beginning of September, end of August, I decided it was best for me to move on in a different direction, and so I got away from all of that. Since then, I have been ramping up things as a performing strongman and motivational speaker, doing lots of corporate stuff, and I'm doing more and more youth stuff, like for kids, high school, that kind of stuff. And what I do with that is I do various feats of strength, bending steel, breaking chains, ripping decks of cards, and I wrap all of that up into an inspirational message. Wrote a couple of books, one on my favorite lift, the bent press, and another one on mental aspects of life and lessons learned from being a strong man, called Superhuman You, which is about how to discover and develop your own superhuman powers to fully express yourself and be happy and make the world a better place. And most recently, I have, I owned a gym for quite a while there. Actually, about a year ago, right around the beginning of August of last year, I closed that gym down to focus more on the speaking and strongman stuff, and also online aspects of my business. And the most recent thing is I've gotten very enamored of minimalist training since my son Liam got here, because anyone who's got kids knows that those first few months, first couple of years, I get maybe hell even longer than that. I'm only 9 months into this thing. Time becomes a super precious commodity, and so I can't go. Well, since I don't have a gym anymore, that's part of it too. But the time was I could go into the gym and be there for 7 or 8 hours and train some people and do some classes and just have as much time to leisurely work on whatever I wanted to work on as far as my own training. But those days are not now. And so time is a precious commodity, and I started looking into more of a minimalist approach, and ultimately arrived at the idea of, can I do something that takes less than 2 hours a week and only uses a single piece of equipment or no equipment at all and still get results out of it? And so I put all that together, and my most recent offering into the market is at the1dumbbellchallenge.com. It's a 12-week program that is designed to get you exactly what I just said, meaningful results in less than 2 hours a week without having to travel back and forth to the gym. If you just have a single dumbbell, you can get it done. So that brings us up to now.
There you go. I don't want to get into the topic too much as far as going into minimalistic training, but so you're speaking. I know you do a lot of motivational speaking and stuff like that. How do people get a hold of you for that? And what do you talk? I mean, it's got to be. It's more than just lifting. So what do you get into as far as your message and things like that?
If anyone's interested in contacting me about that, the website is irontamer.com. And you can go on there, and there's a little like drop down form where you can type in your information. It'll send an email to me. Or if you just want to email me directly at irontamer@gmail.com, you can do that too. As far as topics go, the entire overview of all the different, like 4 different talks that I have sort of templates for various different things. There's the corporate angle, there's the youth angle, there's the like the teacher and school admin angle, and within the corporate, there's a couple different directions I can take stuff. There's success, and then there's leadership, and I kind of differentiate those 2 things. But the overlying theme of all of it is becoming superhuman, and whatever that means to you in terms of what is the thing that you do that you love doing, that makes you better, that helps everyone else get better too. That gives you a hint at what your superhuman powers are. Because I go in depth in the talk defining what does superhuman mean, because we think about movies and comic books and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, the Avengers just crossed over with the most recent movie, which I still haven't seen, into the highest grossing movie of all time. So there's something about superhuman abilities that draws everyone's attention, and I believe it's because we see things in them that we aspire to be. Like the best qualities that we have as humans are embodied in these superhuman characters, and so I help people to figure out what it is that puts them into a superhuman state, while in this particular world that we live in, where people don't actually fly or shoot lasers out of their eyes or any of that kind of stuff.
Nice. I mean, Lonnie, I think since we've had we've talked about days past before, I think we just go to the commercial and get on the topic.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's go to break. We'll be back in just a minute, everybody. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that, and I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. IronRadio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, IronRadio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or IronRadio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
Okay, everybody, we're back. We're on with Dave Whitley, the Iron Tamer, and we're going to talk about minimalistic training. I know we've talked about it before. I mean, I've said it numerous times that I think a fatal mistake that people make with training is they come in with a laundry list of things to do, so it means they end up half-assing all of it because they know they're looking at exercise number 1 and they're looking to clear down to exercise number 14. And you end up reserving energy throughout your training instead of, like, I've put the challenge out there to people. It's like I challenge them to come into my facility and, like, we're literally just going to squat for an hour and a half. And then once we're done, tell me what we missed. So and it's usually nothing. So Dave has a new site and a new book on this, so we're going to get into the what he's talking about. And like he mentioned before in the beginning of the show was if you're sparse on time too, it can be a huge deal. And I think people just they try to make training too complicated when it really doesn't need to be. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of this one dumbbell challenge and talk about what you got going on.
Sure. Well, like I was saying before, the genesis of the whole thing had to do with my own personal experience. I wanted something that was time efficient and result producing and could be done with minimal equipment. And even though for 15, 16 years now, maybe longer than that, I've been very deeply steeped in the use of kettlebells and all of the stuff that goes along with that. And I've done some pretty interesting things in terms of just using kettlebells and kind of focusing in with a minimalist attitude toward that. I started back down that path again, and instead of being excited and feeling like, yeah, let's go do this, I got met with the feeling coming out of myself of, oh, well, we're going to do this again, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I know me well enough to know that I'm just like everybody else in the sense that if I'm, oh, well, I guess we'll do this, I'm probably not going to do whatever that thing is for very long or very much gusto. Mm-hmm. So I started thinking, how can I make this work? And I started, throwing in different things. I was doing some barbell work. I was doing some like general conditioning, tire flipping, sledgehammer stuff, all that. And I started adding in things like battling ropes. And all this is while I'm still keeping progress and working on the feats of strength that I do in the show for a living. So bending steel, blowing up hot water bottles, ripping deck guitars, all that kind of stuff. And I realized that this is not sustainable. This is not what I'm really wanting to do. So I'm like, what can I just completely strip away? Well, the feats practice I have to keep doing because that's just a matter of being able to deliver something as part of my profession. So, okay, that's still going to happen. And to borrow some philosophy from Adam Glass and Frankie Fairs, it's like, what's the minimum amount of work that I can do to keep my strength up and continuing to trend upward in these particular skills? And so that's pretty familiar to me, and I can do that without a whole lot of recovery time needed or a whole lot of training time needed. It's just very much like practicing anything. But as far as the overall strength and conditioning, working with a single dumbbell became very appealing to me because when I closed my gym down, I brought home all the gear that I wanted to keep and sold the rest of it. And it's actually outside in a shed that is made of tin and has 3 walls and a ceiling. So it's a big open machine shed like you'd park a tractor in. Mm-hmm. So when it's chilly here, I'm not going to say cold because I know that cold is relative between north and south. So it doesn't really get cold here, but it'll get chilly. It'll get down to where, water freezes in the lake and all that, but it doesn't get cold like it does up in Minnesota. So I not really concerned about cold as much, but it does get hot in the tin. So I'm like, how can I get in and get out as quick as I can so that I'm not overly exposing myself to this heat and cold and the unpleasantness of all that? And so I started looking at what can I do with this one dumbbell? Okay. First of all, we need to look at some big full body movements. And the one dumbbell challenge has, how many different big movements? I'm drawing a blank on it right now, how many it is. I'd have to count it up. But anyway, we can just go through them. Big full body compound movements like a dumbbell snatch, dumbbell clean and press, using the dumbbell the same way you would a kettlebell for goblet squats. What else in there? One arm rows. I said one arm presses, I think. And then for a horizontal push, I throw in a few push-up variations that can be done. And then on days that I'm not lifting the dumbbell, I'm doing various crawling type things, primitive movement patterns, stuff that I got mostly from the people over at originalstrength.net. So I worked all that into a cohesive thing that made sense on a weekly schedule. And I thought, okay, what's the most time efficient way to do this and do it without the necessity of having adjustable dumbbells to increase weight. I wanted this to be something that somebody could do with a single solid dumbbell that they'd buy like at Sports Authority or Play It Again Sports or wherever. And so I figured out that a dumbbell that weighs about 25 to 35% of body weight is most optimal. And I thought, okay, if time is of the essence here, what kind of protocols can I use that ensure that when I get in, I know when I'm going to get out? When will I be done with this thing so I can get back to changing diapers and doing all that kind of stuff? So I looked at various density protocols. Something I left out in the update for the past 10 years is I went to Ireland and trained with Paul McElroy and became one of the coaches for his Amazing 12 physique transformation program, which is phenomenal. And Paul's been a big influence on my thinking in terms of density protocols as well. So what I did is I set it up on a 3 times every 2 weeks schedule for each lift. And we start with, you go in and you do as many reps as you can do comfortably and well in a given time period. And then after the first 2 weeks, rather than adding weight, I started adding time. And that's the fundamental basis of the whole thing. We start out at just 10 minutes per movement. And then by the time we get to the end of it in 12 weeks, we're at 20 minutes per movement. We're still coming in less than 2 hours a week. Mm-hmm. But even if you keep the same pace during those 10 that you have on the first workout of the first week for 10 minutes, throughout the entire 12 weeks, you're still going to double your volume. Mm-hmm. But density training doesn't work like that because we're constantly striving to do more reps in that same amount of time. So you'll more than double your volume over the course of 12 weeks, which is phenomenally effective and extremely time efficient. And just in case people aren't familiar with the various density protocols or even what density is, we can talk about the 3 main metrics that I use for lifting, or you can do it for just about any physical activity. But primarily we hear it spoken of in lifting. We have intensity, which is what most people think about. And that is not how much noise you can make and how much you can yell and snort talk and all that kind of stuff. Intensity is just mathematically a percentage of a given number. So if we're looking at, say, the deadlift, if you can deadlift 500 pounds for a 1 rep max, and it's a true 1 rep max, like the kind where you're halfway up and a mosquito lands on the bar and you drop it because you can't handle literally another microgram of weight. True 1 rep max is 500 pounds, then 400 pounds would be 80% intensity. 350 pounds would be 70% intensity. You can see how that math works. And that's what everybody thinks about when they think about improvement or progression, is just adding more weight to the bar. If I started out at 70% intensity at the beginning of a cycle, and by the end of it I'm doing 85% intensity, then I've increased that. And then you can test 1 rep max and intensity levels values of percentages change based on whatever the 1 rep max is. If you were going to use an intensity metric for something like kettlebell swings, kettlebell snatches, or any sort of an endurance type thing, you would take the number of reps done with the weight during that given period of time as a maximal effort. Or I guess if you were, say you were running, you could, how far did you run in a given period of time, all out? That would be a 100% intensity for that. So let's say that we're talking about kettlebell snatches, and you can do 200 kettlebell snatches with a given weight in 15 minutes. Well, if you go in and set a timer for 15 minutes and you do 150 kettlebell snatches with the same weight, then you're operating at 75% intensity. I hope that makes sense, and that I'm not just kind of, glossing over it too much. I'm fairly confident that most people that are listening to this show would be familiar with these concepts anyway, so I'll just give a quick summary. But that's the one that the average person thinks of as the way to measure progress. And if you're not putting more weight on the bar or doing more reps in the same time period, then or doing more reps with the same weight, then you're not increasing your intensity at all. But that's not, and that's true, but you can still progress without changing the level of intensity, which is that mathematical formula, percentage of a given number. The second metric that comes to mind is volume, and it's directly related. If I can lift a weight that weighs 100 pounds for 10 reps, and that's all I got, and then next time I'm able to lift it for 12 reps, then there's a 20% increase in volume during that particular session. And the same thing would be true with the timed snatch example earlier. If I start out at my maximum is 200 reps in 15 minutes, and then I come back in 3 months and I'm doing 220 reps in 15 minutes with the same rate of perceived effort, then I am doing 10% more volume. And that's pretty much how that works. The thing that gets overlooked most often, but I think is really one of the most powerful things that we can utilize, is density. And density draws on the other two, in that we are concerned with the amount of work done in a given period of time. And there are 2 ways to progress on this. So if I can, let's say if I can, we'll use the snatches because it's an easy one to use. If I can do 200 snatches in 15 minutes with a given weight, and I can do, next session I do 220, but it takes me 20 minutes, I kept the same pace, maybe. I'm not really doing the math on that as I'm going. You can see that if it takes longer to do more, you didn't change density. What density improvement would be is if I can do 220 in 15 minutes, or if I can do 200, the same amount of work in less time, like say 13 minutes, just arbitrarily pulling numbers out. So density is related to intensity and volume, but it's sort of a manipulation of those. And so if you can do something for 100 reps now in a given period of time, and in 3 weeks you can do the same 100 reps in less time, you've increased your density. And likewise, if you do it for 100 reps now in a certain period of time, and in 3 weeks you're doing 120 reps in the same period of time, then there's an increase in density from that perspective as well. So those are very useful metrics to track, and I got very enamored of pointing that out to clients when I was running a gym, because they would come in and maybe they would stick at the same weight for several weeks, but we were pushing to do more reps and more reps in the same period of time, or to compress those reps into less time. And so I could point out mathematically on a piece of paper, okay, the weight hasn't gone up, but you are stronger because you're doing more work. And being able to get that paradigm shift on people away from adding weight to the bar is the only way to make progress, and toward looking for different ways to make progress in a given within a given session, was very empowering to them, and made it obvious that they were making progress literally every single workout.
Right on. Yeah, and I think I'm just going to add, I think the biggest mistake that people get into, especially maybe our listeners here, which is very much strength-based and traditional
powerlifting, bodybuilding, things like that is that they get caught up in the only thing that matters to them is the number on the bar and doing more. And they lose the other ways to progress. So that you just touched on. So
well, and if you're a recreational athlete or a non-competitive athlete, I should say, does it really matter what your 1 rep max is?
No, not at all.
It doesn't. I'm much more interested for myself in driving up my 5 rep max because I know if my 5 rep max goes up, my 1 rep max will go up. And 1 rep max, for me and for a lot of the people that I've worked with, if we focus on that and we keep coming back to testing that out, it becomes very emotionally draining. And driving up a 5 rep max just is more fun. And I don't really know why that is, but it just seems that way to me.
I think it's more functional too. You know, if you can move, let's say, 85 or 90% load for 5 reps. I mean, when you think about daily tasks and stuff, it's rarely a single super brief effort. It just seems more functional in that kind of 5 rep range, at least to me.
Well, yeah, it's also generally speaking, it's also a lot safer. Because let's say you're going 5 and you get to 3 and it's like, oh, this is going bad. You still have the abort button you can push. Whereas there's no abort on number 1. So it's just...
yeah, true.
Well, there is, but none of us want to be in that.
Right.
So, no, and the first thing that gets me thinking about this with the dumbbell challenge is, you know, like I'm very time constrained as well. I've got a 4-year-old son. I've got 2 businesses I run and this and that. So I end up training. I get most of my training in 1 day a week. But well, it's what I call training. I do other stuff during the week, but it's not a real training session. I try and fit in what I can here and there. Would be doing something like this and fitting it into somebody like me. I'm a competitive powerlifter. I get my squats, my benches, my deadlift all on Saturday. But the possibility of adding in something like this as the other days,
sure,
seems like it'd be a good fit in. So, I mean, is something like that possible with what we got going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the pure program that I put together, obviously.
Yeah,
we're putting 2 goals in at the same time, but it would definitely support that. If someone came to me and asked me that same question professionally, of course I'd want to look and see what they're actually doing on the squat, bench, and deadlift days. But I have a pretty good idea of how the top or the most common 3 or 4 different approaches to powerlifting work. So I would say, yeah, we could do Saturday could be your powerlifting day, and you know, you've got probably a couple hours that you're going to take to get all the work done in there to do that, because of rest between sets and everything that's involved with that. But then I would probably say on a couple of other days we might do something like with the 1 dumbbell challenge. The 3 days that we're doing the dumbbell work, it's 2 sessions that start out at 10 minutes each and end up at 20 minutes each. So those are the density parameters, and there's 3 days of that. So what I would do in a case like what you're asking me is I would drop that down to 1 session, and I would probably start at 15 minutes instead of 10, and say that, okay, you're doing your powerlifting on Saturday. Let's do your dumbbell conditioning type work on either Monday or Tuesday, and also on Thursday. So that way we've got as much of a buffer in between, probably on Tuesday and Thursday. If you're lifting really hard on Saturday, we'll give you a couple of days to recover from that. And then we would have you go in and do, say, 15 minutes of dumbbell snatches, trying to drive that density up each successive training session. So if you got 50 reps per hand on day 1, we're shooting for 51 reps per hand or more on day 2. And then on the other day of density training, I would probably, with squat, bench, and deadlift, I would probably let the other movement be a 1-arm dumbbell row, because I think that horizontal pull would be the thing that would be most needed, most lacking in relation to building strength for your powerlifting. You didn't say anything about accessory work, but I'm assuming if you're approaching it from a minimalist standpoint and you're the kind of guy that would take somebody in on a dare to squat for 90 minutes and not do anything else, then say that probably, and I'm speculating on this, most of your powerlifting work is going to be the power lifts themselves.
Yeah.
Practice the technique and add the weight. So that horizontal pull would be the thing that would be most lacking from just a pure squat, bench, and deadlift. And the conditioning that goes along with the snatch, I think, would be very beneficial as well. I reserve the right, as I think about this more, to come back in a few days and pull either one of those and replace it with a one-arm clean and press. But I hesitate to put much overhead pressing into a program where someone's doing a lot of bench pressing.
Yeah. Lonnie, what do you got?
Well, one of the things that you guys are talking about that makes me think, like, David, for example, I mean, I guess my question would be, a lot of this recent interest of yours stems from your own personal lack of time, right? That kind of thing. And I don't think you're alone in that. I guess I would wonder, are you rare, though, in that your advanced status makes maintenance, like of muscle mass, for example, or strength? Does it make maintenance easier compared to someone like an intermediate, right? I mean, like you and Phil, you guys are talking about very minimal investment here. But you're already, you've got this long-standing base of development, and it's easier to maintain, I would argue, than to break new ground in a lot of ways. And you guys are just really advanced, so you guys can get away with the minimalist thing. Maybe an early intermediate couldn't. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just looking for input on this kind of stuff.
I don't think so. I think that gains are harder to come by the more advanced you are.
Okay.
In every experience anyway. I think that for example, if I take some time off from a particular movement and then circle back around to it, it's easier for me to get back to where I was or near where I was when I stopped. But to go forward from there is not as easy. But I think that it depends on where in the continuum of beginner to advanced we're talking about this intermediate being. Because if they're a few years into it and they change to something like, let's say that they've been doing more of a traditional sets and reps, 5 sets of 5 or whatever, something like that, coming into it. If they change to a density protocol, it's such, and they've never done it before, it's such a novel stimulus that it can be surprising how much progress can be made in a very short period of time, just because the stimulus is so different. Our as human beings, talking about superpowers, we have two that are common to everyone. The first one is imagination, which I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, but like literally everything around me in the room that I'm in right now was imagined before it became a reality. And so all of us can imagine something and then go about creating it. The second one, which is more relevant to what we're talking about here, is the ability to rationalize and reason out how to create adaptations to stimulus in ourselves. So the trap of the 1 rep max is the narrow thinking of the only way that I can grow stronger, which is an adaptation, is to add weight to the bar. And the only way I can add weight to the bar is to grow stronger, and you get caught in that loop. But if we use our ability to reason and think things through and research and look at our own experience and see what actually worked, then we can reason out a way to make adaptations work in the same way using a different stimulus. So you'll get a lot stronger doing a density protocol if you've never done one and you're coming off of a more traditional 5 sets of 5 or 8 sets of 3, something like that. You'll also put on some muscle mass with it. But at the end of a given period of time, usually somewhere between 12 weeks and a year of doing the density protocol, you'll adapt very well to that. And adaptation, part of the reason that it exists, is to make things that are a new novel stimulus to us not cause us to react physiologically with as much intensity, for lack of a better word. It's a different definition, but like initial adaptations, beginner gains, you can deadlift 135 pounds. You've never lifted anything before. It's not unreasonable to expect someone to be able to get to 250, 275, maybe even over 300 pounds within a year if they're healthy.
Yeah.
That's the beginner gain on that. We can reason that out and think, okay, what stimulus? I've been doing deadlifts for a year. I've done this, and in the first 6 months, I put 200 pounds on, and in the last 6 months, I put 30 pounds on. Mm-hmm. What can I do to change the stimulus to get a response that's more in line with what I want? And so you just change to whatever you come up with, and you give it a test run, and you see how it works. And if you go back and forth between things like that, I believe that your capacity for adaptation, it becomes easier to adapt to whatever stimulus comes your way. It's like you're literally practicing the ability to adapt. Mm-hmm. And you do that by giving yourself various different stimuli to get that adaptive response going.
Yeah, it makes sense to me that you, like, because I would argue probably a lot of our listeners are in that sort of intermediate-ish range, Mm-hmm. They're not doing feats of strength. They're not squatting 800 pounds. So they might not have the heroic adaptive base, that someone like maybe one of you guys might have. But the point being is, it makes a lot of sense to me that they might take a mesocycle, a period of 8 to 12 weeks, and just completely change the point, especially if they've got diminishing returns like you're talking about, which is sort of a principle, right? Everybody's going to eventually get diminishing returns in the weight on the bar. They're not going to make beginner gains all, linearly forever. It sounds interesting to me. My one question would be, though, with this density approach, I mean, if time is fixed and the weight, like the dumbbell, is fixed in these equations, what you've got is how quickly you can get more reps in, right, in that time period. Do you ever feel rushed doing that? I mean, you're an experienced lifter. You're probably not going to break skill at some point, right? You'll put down the dumbbell, but is that a potential pitfall? I'm just trying to be devil's advocate here, right? Because we have a lot of intermediate lifters and whatnot. Does this ever feel rushed, this density approach?
It does sometimes, but I am not really a competitive guy, which is kind of strange given that I do what I do. If you can call on the healthy aspects of being competitive and kind of channel that rushing into excitement, then you're doing well with it. But yeah, I can see where it could be that way, and someone who wasn't as skilled or didn't have the same amount of body awareness as a more advanced person could let their execution, their form kind of deteriorate in order to get more reps in, and that's not the point. Mm-hmm. That is just another way to mess up, just like what we were talking about earlier with there's no abort button on the first rep of 1 rep max. If you're in the middle of that rep and you know that it's going bad, then you got to deal with it. If you're in a density protocol and you're like, okay, I really want to beat my previous number and put an increase on it from that, but as you're getting closer to the end, you're seeing that your pace is falling off. The smart thing to do, and what I do myself, is recognize that and be like, okay, what's really going on here? I only got 3 hours of sleep last night instead of what I normally get, and there's this and this and this external stressor in my life. Okay, that's clearly affecting my performance. I'm just going to just ease back and relax a little bit, and I'll do an unplanned, for lack of a better term, deload on that session, and just honor what my body's telling me.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's Dan John that talked about that a lot. That like 10% of days are really good days, 10% are really bad days, 80% are just days. So
yeah,
you're gonna have those bad days, and you have to be mature and take those.
Well, and I don't call them bad days. I framed them in such a way that, okay, this is a day that I needed more rest.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing, No,
I agree.
And it's important to not let our identity get wrapped up in putting weight on the bar, putting reps on the board, because nobody, or at least I don't, want to be the strongest broken guy in the room.
Yeah.
Down south where I am, we call those people used-to-coulds.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, in a system like this, which I've done some density stuff before, I don't think people realize that it's not as mentally taxing as it seems. When you approach that next day, and let's say you have a baseline, I did 200 snatches.
Sure.
Okay, to progress, I just need to do 201.
Yep.
I can do one more, and then you can walk away happy. I did one more than last time, and that's literal progress.
Literal.
So it makes it easy to eat. It
does.
So
it does, and like with the classic story that always gets pointed at that defines progressive resistance is Milo and the bull, right? So Milo would pick the bull up and carry it every day. He didn't pick the bull up after he added a 45-pound plate to it.
Yeah.
And the other thing no one talks about is every year he would get a new calf. So he wasn't carrying a full-grown bull once it got full-grown forever.
Yeah.
He was cycling.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting.
Yeah. Peaks and valleys.
Yeah. And I also I realized just now we were in the midst of all this talk about density training, I have not mentioned Charles Staley. Charles was the first person that Charles and Alan Cosgrove were the first two people that I'd ever read anything about density training. He calls his particular variant of the protocol escalated density training, which is EDT. But it was probably back in 2003, 2004 that I first got exposed to the idea, and it made sense to me then. So I just want to make sure if I'm on a public forum talking about density training, I don't forget to mention Charles, because he had an impact on me a long time ago.
One more question. So, well, it's probably several questions, but anyways. So at first, week to week, we advance by trying to fit more quality work into the same amount of time.
Yes.
Correct? And then at a point, we add more time.
Correct.
This can't go on for an infinite amount of time. Is there ever a point in time where you just earn the right to, okay, and now I get a bigger dumbbell?
Sure. I mean, it's the idea working within these confined parameters was to make it as simple as possible for the average person. But I talk about it in the videos in the instructional section of this, that if you want to add weight, feel free to, but we're still going to be increasing time.
Yeah.
The way that the density's set up is after 3 sessions of any given lift, which is a 2-week period. So like, let's say the first week would be Monday, Friday, and then the second week would be Wednesday. And then you have 2 different sessions. So you do like A, B, A, and then B, A, B. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When you get done with that little 2-week mini cycle that's within the 12 weeks, that's when you add time. And you only add 2 minutes. So again, like that, adding one more snatch, then I only have to go for 2 more minutes. It's not like I'm doubling the amount of time that I'm doing this. So let's say, for example, you're doing snatches again, and you do in 10 minutes on that third session, you do 200 reps, 100 per arm in the 10 minutes, which is a lot. When we roll into the next period, the next 2-week period, the next session of that, you'll have 12 minutes. And my recommendation is get the same number of reps as you got in 10 minutes during that 12-minute period. And then if you feel like throwing a few more in, go ahead and do that. So there's a built-in wave with that approach. As the time increases, I'm not asking you to maintain the same pace the entire time. I'm saying let that pace fill up 12 minutes instead of 10 minutes at the beginning of the third week, and then we will work toward having, by the end of the second 2-week period, hopefully the same pace per minute as we had at 10 minutes, only now it's for 12, thereby getting that increase in both volume and in density. Yeah.
For sure. Much like you talked about with Milo. Basically, you're going to push it for 3 weeks. Now you're going to back off a little bit, extend the time, and then try to push it again. Yeah, makes sense.
The other thing that never gets mentioned with Milo is I've never heard anyone talk about how far he carried the bull or how long it took him.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it was the length of the stadium, but I've never heard any exact measurements of that. So the principle is there. You just have to think about what are the various different things that influence the principle. Because if I'm carrying a bull for 10 yards, it's way different than I'm carrying it for 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in an exercise science lab, this is the concept of power, right? It's force times distance divided by time. So
Right.
if the force is the dumbbell and the distance is, let's say a third of a meter, half a meter, but repeatedly, right, the more repetitions, the more, excuse me, that distance increases. Yeah, it's power. And, I mean, that's such a big thing. I mean, one of the things that ties, I think, a lot of our listeners together is that they're power athletes of some kind. They're a lifter, they're a sprinter, they're a thrower, that kind of stuff. And power is the name of the game in a lot of these sports, not just force, right? Not just the weight.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And making meaningful comparisons like that is vitally important. Have you guys watched that Strongest Man in History thing that's been on?
I've watched a little bit of it. I've got to sit down and watch the rest, but yeah.
I've seen a couple of YouTube clips of it, and this. I have absolute respect for all of those guys that are in that show. But I watched the segment on the overhead press last night, and Paul Anderson's record was 402 pounds clean and press, and it was done strict Olympic style back when that lift was still contested. There's video of him doing it. I don't know if there's video of him doing the 402, but there's video of him doing enormous amounts of weight in a really poorly executed clean, almost like a clean. And once the weight gets to his collarbones, he locks his knees and they do not bend again. And he strict presses this. One of my favorite videos of him is he's got this massive 300-pound dumbbell that he presses for a double with one arm, a side press. It's amazing. But anyway, I was watching these guys, and they're like, okay, we're going to load the bar at 406 because that's the configuration of plates that they had. And we're going to leave the clean out of it. We're going to take it off the rack and press it overhead. And, putting 400 pounds over your head is amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm not taking that away from any of these guys, but it's not the same taking it from shoulder to overhead as it is taking it from the ground to the shoulder to overhead. And so that's not really a meaningful comparison is the whole point of that. So I do the best that I can in the one dumbbell challenge to maintain the integrity of the comparison. So all the snatches go from the ground to overhead, for example. So that's a bit of a long-winded explanation, but you guys know what I mean.
right on. Well, we're just about out of time. What would be sort of your top tips then? I mean, what are you trying to communicate the most with your most recent work, book, websites? I think we covered a lot of good stuff. I love the definitions, right, because it helps people have a language which they can start to think about building a program. And I love what you're doing because a lot of this stuff it meets my needs too. I mean, the older I get, the more time is even more valuable than money, as funny as that sounds. And I mean, I'm always struggling to build some volume, but I don't have the time to do it. Well,
Yep.
Well, this squeezes more volume into the same amount of time, or even less time. So the minimalist thing is good. Yeah, but can you encapsulate in a message maybe as something that you would want to have listeners think about all week?
Well, the place to start with it is I was wondering what are the biggest problems and the biggest mistakes that I've seen people make, that I've made myself, that I see people complaining about on social media. And I narrowed it down and decided to make a cheat sheet out of it. And so if you go to the onedumbbellchallenge.com and put your name and email address in there, yes, you get put on my mailing list. Yes, I'm going to send you emails. Yes, I will attempt to sell you something. So you know that going in. But this cheat sheet is free, and you don't have to buy anything from me. Hopefully the cheat sheet itself is valuable enough. But it's these very common mistakes that happen in training. And I would start from there and look at what are those mistakes, how am I making those mistakes, or where am I making those mistakes in my training, and what can I do to clean it up? Because just doing that will make significant amount of change in what's going on. If you're doing something that doesn't work and you change it to something that does work, by definition, you're going to get better at it.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of knowing if what I'm doing is actually working, or accepting whether it's actually working.
I like that a lot, and I like the brief cheat sheet approach because, I mean, I do this myself, is I religiously keep a workout log, but I don't always go back and really analyze it. Over the last 12 weeks, what did I do wrong, or what could I have done better? Where am I dropping the ball here, or what am I after? Did I meet that goal, and should I change up the mesocycle? So I think a lot of people maybe lack, at least I have in the past, which is funny because of the nature of my job as a professor. I mean, I do research all the time, but I need to be more analytical and identify some of these things. And like you said, the idea of increasing power output and density, it's such a novel stimulus. I think a lot of people, it might break a plateau for them or something like that.
Sure.
So.
And it's so easy to measure too. You don't have to keep like extremely meticulously anal retentive details in your training logs. Just how many reps did I do last time? How many do I need to do this time?
Right on.
Because and I even explain how to track that in detail, because the importance of the training log is easily overlooked. And I'll be the first one to admit that I don't keep a training log as well as I could. I don't really know why that is. I think I just get into training mode and don't feel like writing things down.
Yeah.
But the only thing worse than not making progress is making phenomenal progress and not knowing how you did it when you look back. So if you keep a training log, then you know why it worked or why it didn't work. And if you 5 years ago decided to enter a bench press competition and you tried this new thing and you added 30 pounds to your bench press and then you forgot that that's what you did, you can go back and look in your log and be like, okay, I want to compete in this bench press thing again. What do I need to do? What did I do last time that worked so well? And go mine from that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's being a scientist. Observe, record, analyze. Observe, record, analyze. Right. Otherwise, like you said, it's just all subjective and it gets lost to time. And yeah, it's sort of a tragedy in a sense, isn't it? Like, oh my God, I put 30 pounds on my bench and I can't remember what I did. Well, if you observe and record, you can go back and look, kind of thing. So.
Yep. If you observe, record, and analyze, then you can add that fourth step for us lifters, and that is apply.
Right on. Apply. Absolutely.
I just made that up.
No, that's true. I mean, I've often said knowledge isn't power. Applied knowledge is power.
Sure.
So in the general sense. But.
Absolutely. Napoleon Hill said knowledge is only potential power. It's how it's applied that determines how much power is actually there.
Exactly. Awesome. I love it. All right. Well, good stuff. We got some information. Maybe one more time for everybody where they can reach you.
They can reach me if they're interested in any of the strongman or motivational speaking stuff. The website is IronTamer.com. The one dumbbell challenge.com is where to go to get your cheat sheet and to find out more about that particular program. And I've got some, I didn't even mention this, I've got some really sweet bonuses that I threw in there too. I've got an interview with Adam Glass, I've got an interview with Bud Jeffries, and then I've also got a special deal on there where I'll throw in a couple of coaching calls with me at a very, very discounted price. So that's at the1dumbbellchallenge.com. And otherwise, if you just want to see what I'm up to, Iron Tamer Dave Whitley on social media, or on Facebook rather, and Iron Tamer on Instagram. And then I've got a YouTube channel too. Again, that's Iron Tamer Dave Whitley. So that's how to see what I'm doing and how to get in touch with me.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, my man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at ironradio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the IronRadio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on IronRadio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.